Remember how the oil industry is telling us that fracking is completely safe, there's nothing wrong with it, it won't contaminate the water, don't worry about it?
Truman Burnett's retirement dream has been destroyed after a gas industry truck spilled a small amount of polluted frack water onto his property.
Our heaven now it's turned into our hell.
More than a dozen residents in Greenbrier, Arkansas are suing fracking companies over earthquakes that have been linked to fracking.
Pennsylvania is already at the center of a natural gas boom. The gas industry generates more than 600,000 jobs. That could grow to 870,000 by 2015.
Now, over the past 10 years, fracking has led to a U.S. boom in oil and gas production, generating hundreds of billions in revenue for companies and landowners.
Hydraulic fracturing is the process of pumping high amounts of water, sand, and chemicals into the Earth's crust to stimulate rocks called shale in order to obtain the natural resources. This process is relatively easier than conventional drilling. In order to obtain these natural resources, a well is drilled into the crust that is vertical at the start, but goes horizontal once it is near the resources. The well eventually looks like the shape of an L. The wells can be miles under the surface, and the horizontal parts can be 1,000 to 6,000 feet from the vertical part of the well. Then, a steel pipe is inserted into the well. The steel pipe has holes near the ends of it so that the fracturing fluid, which includes water, sand, and chemicals, can be pumped into the pipe and be released inside the crust. The fluid creates a great amount of pressure that causes the resource to fracture, allowing for the resources to then be pumped back to the surface. The water that was used to crack the resource is then treated before being released. While hydraulic fracturing has gained a lot of exposure within the past decade, the practice of fracking to gather natural resources has been around since the late 1860s. It wasn't until the 1930s that non-explosive fracking was introduced and became widely used. Since the emergence of fracking as a valuable tool in the procurement of natural gas, many experts have begun to discuss the possibility of the United States having energy independence. This could potentially have a large impact on the country's foreign policy and international economic relations. Global energy demand is projected to increase by 35% from 2015 to 2035, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, with developing nations such as China and India continuing to put pressure on the world's energy supply. Natural gas has become increasingly important in the equation of how to meet the world's growing energy demands. Because of the United States' large reserves of shale gas, advocates say American energy independence is a real possibility if the industry is given support. This could mean a lower dependence on foreign oil. Those against the use of fracking tend to push for developing renewable energy sources as a means of reaching energy independence, and say that fracking is just a way to distract the focus of these energy sources. However, there are still many issues that need to be addressed in this area of the energy debate. Those for fracking counter these types of arguments by saying that fracking for natural gas buys more time for the development and research of renewable energy resources. However, the environment surrounding the fracking sites are seeing environmental damage. Because of mistakes and bad construction, fracking can affect an area's water and cause other social problems. The rigs can cause loud noises, produce odors, and surrounding areas will be lit up brightly during the night. It causes a decrease in the value of homes. The value of a home will be lessened if clean water and a living environment is not available. In general, the possibility of water contamination and living near gas rigs can decrease the value of a home by over 24%. Well water is threatened when fracking enters an area. Water availability is especially threatened in other areas of the country such as Texas and Colorado, but not as much in Pennsylvania at this point in time. Fracking requires huge amounts of water to be injected into the ground so that the resources can be fractured underground. After this water is used, it is either highly contaminated when brought back up, or it is kept underground to sit there. Each well usually uses about 2 to 8 million gallons of water, and each well can be fracked multiple times. The wastewater that stays underground can affect well water because of either faulty construction or bad casing or cementing. If water is brought back to the surface, it is highly contaminated with chemicals and can affect existing surface water if disposed of improperly. Pennsylvania residents and other residents in fracking areas have found methane in their water. Because methane is flammable and explosive, it has led to fatal accidents such as house fires. The methane levels in wells were found to be 17 times higher than the level of wells far from fracking sites. A study done at the Duke School of Environment found that the methane in well water was connected to the process of fracking. This dirty water coming out of people's faucets has caused problems other than its flammable and explosive properties. There have been residents that claim it leads to health issues. There have been over 1,000 cases of respiratory, sensory, and psychological damage, but there has been very little evidence to prove that water did this to them. The symptoms of poisoning that are most common include rashes and various irritations along with headaches and stomach problems. Some families have begun to give their livestock bottled water because of cattle deaths due to the water being contaminated. Wildlife have also seen direct problems, especially fish who live in contaminated water. On the other hand, new estimates from the Environmental Protection Agency show that the leakage of methane from wells, pipelines, and other infrastructure is much lower than previously believed. The Environmental Protection Agency has not made conclusions about these problems, but have gone to investigate various locations, but because they are working on research now, it's hard to gather real evidence that is complete. The EPA has investigated methane in water in Dymock, Pennsylvania, but ended up backing out. They also led an investigation in Parker County, Texas about bubbling methane in water and left that one as well. They found evidence of contamination of water linked to fracking in Pavilion, Wyoming, but eventually handed the case over to Encana, the gas company that caused pollution of the water aquifer. Even though natural gas is the preferred form of energy and the cleanest, it still pollutes the air, and that contribution to climate change can be harmful to humans in our future. Methane is emitted when the fracking mixture comes back to the surface, which is 1.4 to 3 times more potent when compared to CO2. Shale gas's greenhouse gas footprint is larger than conventional gas due to methane emissions into the air, but evidence shows that natural gas burns cleaner than other fossil fuels. Researchers at Massachusetts Institute of Technology have recently found that replacing coal power plants with natural gas could work as a part of a plan to reduce greenhouse emissions by more than 50%. Regulation is still a major issue. Some oil and gas industry laws are outdated and have yet to be updated since before the shale revolution. Gas construction industries are exempt from certain federal laws because the practice would be impossible if they had to follow them. Instead, gas industries impose regulations for themselves, and there are different regulations state by state. Federal acts like the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Safe Drinking Water Act do not impose the strict regulations on gas and oil industry construction companies. These acts specify how to store and dispose toxic waste, how to properly control stormwater discharge, and the regulation of chemicals that are allowed to be injected into the ground. However, fracking industries don't have to follow these specific regulations, even though they have their own regulations to follow. But according to many oil and gas companies, there has been a greater push to regulate fracking from within the industry. The experience of fracking in Pennsylvania has led to industry practices that mitigate the effect of drilling and fracking on the local environment. Companies like ExxonMobil take extensive measures to minimize the environmental impacts of fracking, support the public disclosure of fracking chemicals, and take extra precautions to protect water supplies near various operations. These companies and those who support fracking say that all industrial processes have risks, and drilling for unconventional oil and gas is no different. ExxonMobil also analyzes every significant operation the corporation undertakes through what is called the Operations Integrity Management System, or OIMS. OIMS helps to identify potential safety, environmental, and social impacts, as well as help implement procedures and processes to mitigate risks. Fracking has become a major controversial issue in our state, nation, and other parts of the world. While there are definite benefits to hydraulic fracking for our country as a whole, it does have negative impacts on individuals, families, and communities. Until the EPA rules on fracking, we are unable to determine the effects fracking has on the environment and public health. It is highly plausible that hydraulic fracturing will continue to grow and play an important role in how we gather fossil fuels, but if the negative impacts of fracking are ignored, it is probable that fracking will do more harm than good. The EPA will have to weigh both possibilities in making its final decision.
Accessories. My name is Hank Hill, and I sell propane and propane accessories.